Welcome back to Tariff and Trade Perspectives. I'm Kara Selby. Joining me today is Martha Gonsalves, a partner in our Customs and International Trade practice, and Vipul Soni, a director in our Value Creation practice, specializing in manufacturing and private equity. Canada's been experiencing 3 months of this tariff roller coaster, and one of the most impacted sectors has been the manufacturing sector. Martha, what's changed since the last time we chatted?
Maybe we just take a quick step back and say, tariffs that are on. So we've got our border action tariffs that are still on. We've got our steel and aluminum tariffs that are still on. And now we have fair reciprocal tariffs that have just recently been added. So if we go to border action tariffs, that's that broad sweeping, all US or all Canadian origin goods going into the United States, 25%. Steel and aluminum, 25%. And then the fair and reciprocal plan, Canada kind of got a little bit of a reprieve, if you will, because we have those border action tariffs. Once border action is removed, then these fair and reciprocal tariffs will start to be implemented and Canada will be exposed at 12%.
So not confusing at all.
Not confusing one bit.
And tariffs that can stack too.
Yes, the IEEPA tariffs or those border action tariffs can actually stack on top of those steel and aluminum tariffs. So we're really seeing Canadian origin steel and aluminum going into the United States at 50%.
That's a lot for us to adjust to here in Canada.
Yeah, but there are some exceptions. If your goods qualify for CUSMA, the free trade agreement that we have with the United States and Mexico, the border action tariffs can be exempt from that 25%. And the fair reciprocal plan can be exempt from those, as well as the automotive tariffs that have come into place as well. Now there's some catches on that, but USMCA or CUSMA does not exempt you from the steel and aluminum tariff.
Vipul, with Martha's great explanation of all the tariffs that could impact these sectors, can you explain a little bit what impact from a deals perspective are you seeing on the manufacturing sector, including automotive?
As you already said, confusing for sure, right? What all these tariffs are resulting into is a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty by its nature is just bad for the deals environment because deals which were ongoing, now the due diligence process have become lengthier. Deals which were supposed to hit the market have been delayed because both buyers and sellers, there is that increasing gap in what is the correct value of a particular asset just because of the sheer amount of uncertainty that exists. So in the short term, deal making has definitely slowed down. What we see is a greater impetus on value creation activities from a cost optimization perspective, from a working capital perspective. You've already seen in the news how unfortunate news of plant closures or pausing on plants activities. You see news of layoffs. So that's just companies reorganizing their income statement to see where can they cut costs. There is also an increasing focus on where can I reorganize my supply chain. So from that aspect, you will see a lot of Canadian manufacturers that currently do not have a footprint in the US actively looking at buying US manufacturing capabilities.
So what are we expecting to see now, Martha?
What we're seeing right now is a lot of Canadian companies are looking at all avenues in relation to, is there any mitigating strategy for them? What does that look like? So the Canadian government has actually offered remission applications for those companies where they source their goods from the United States and do not have any alternatives. So we have a lot of companies that are looking at those remission opportunities. Then we also have other companies where a duty drawback may be available to them. So they import raw materials, manufacture a finished product, subsequently ship that finished product to the United States. Those are some of the opportunities that are available to Canadian companies that they're looking as a first measure.
And how long does the remission process usually take? I know it's something new with the US, but we have dealt with this previously with China, correct?
Correct. Typically, the Canadian government likes to say that they'll respond within a 60-day window of receiving the application. That response could be that they're asking for additional details. Now, we have seen some companies receive remission applications or approval of their remission, especially for the Chinese origin goods, within 120 days. So
that's still a long time.
Still a long period of time, yeah.
Vipul, what are we seeing from a deals perspective long term?
Whenever the dust settles, all of these conditions have further added to a theme which will create a very robust deal environment. Because even before we got into the tariff environment, everybody was reading news about records amount of dry powder from a private equity perspective. So there's a lot of undeployed capital out there that still needs to be deployed but has been delayed because of the short term that we expected. Speaking about the automotive industry, you already had a lot of mid to small scale manufacturers that were frankly speaking struggling from a margin perspective. The industry overall, electric vehicle sales were slowing down. All of that slowdown in consumer activity was like going through the entire automotive value chain. And then the tariffs hit. Unfortunately, you have companies in the value chain that simply do not have the wherewithal to absorb these tariffs, even if they were in place for the 6 months period. From that standpoint, you will see a lot more activity from the restructuring standpoint. Even larger companies will look to restructure their current operations, and there would be assets that would be available in the market at very relatively cheap multiples. On the other hand, this is opportunity for the larger companies which have a healthier balance sheet. This is a great opportunity for them to consolidate their footprint and gain future market share. So I do feel that from a deal making perspective, after a period of 6 months, and that can be 4 months or 8-month period as well, but once the dust settles, you will have an increasing amount of deal activity and increasing amount of consolidation in the space.
So can we move towards what actions can Canadian manufacturing companies take?
Fundamentally, companies need to have like an internal project steering committee, if you will, right? Like there needs to be a well thought out plan looking at both quick wins, value preservation or value creation activities, if you will, like i.e. how can I boost my cash flow in the short term while the dust settles, and B, fundamental long-term questions need to be asked internally at a management level or a board level, with or without the help of external advisors. But you need to ask yourself questions like, okay, where do I see myself growing strategically? If I look at my current product portfolio, do I really need all of it, or doing that 80-20 rule, am I actually losing money or margin on some of the products that I should just simply discontinue? If I look at my current supply chain, both from a buyer and a seller perspective, how can I strategically grow into newer geographies, or how can I onboard new customers to diversify my current footprint? But at the same point in time, how do I reorganize my supply chain?
And Martha, what do you think? What actions can manufacturing companies take in Canada?
Know your impact, develop a way of identifying what your landed cost is actually going to be, given that these tariffs stack. So developing a tariff landing factor, if you will, at the SKU level, so that they know all those materials and components that go into a finished product, how it's ultimately going to change the value of that finished product.
Well, thank you, Martha and Vipul, for joining me here today.